I wonder if you could sort out this controversy with a defiant Joe Biden and with this feeding frenzy around the notion of him stepping down.
Yeah, well, Mark, I was really thinking about this as I was getting ready to jump on with you here, my brother, that here's the biggest overarching problem, and then I'll dive into those two real quickly. The overarching problem is that the main thing has become not the main thing for the Democrats. The main thing we've heard for months, if not years, is defeating Donald Trump. The problem right now is that the political battle has shifted. And so the political battle is now within the Democratic Party very, very clearly. And so sight is being lost of the gigantic objective of their political war. So what do I mean by that? We have what's unfolding with Biden. Everybody knows that now. The last 10 days have been unprecedented, starting with the debate, continuing with the Stephanopoulos interview, and then remarkably, and this is what I want to focus on, the president calling into Morning Joe this morning, because it is very clear that the wagons have not only been circled, but every single piece of political armament they have is now focused outside of that circle of wagons. And think Yellowstone 1883, think Horizon, think what you want to think in terms of an analogy. But that is where the Biden White House and the Biden campaign is. It is ultimate circle the wagons time. And the problem is, what you heard on Morning Joe this morning is the biggest single problem. The president has said basically, I mean, it was amazing to me, Mark. He called out fellow Democrats, said, listen, bring it on. You want to challenge me at the convention? Go ahead. That's what it's going to take. And I'll tell you what, that has been the biggest fear on Capitol Hill, is that when they got back today, they were going to try to put together a House and Senate, some kind of delegations, some kind of building of some kind of consensus or momentum to say, Mr. President, this is the week. That's what you keep hearing from donors, from Congress, from us. This is the week we got to make a decision about what we're going to do. And so what does the president do? He throws down the gauntlet on Morning Joe on the Monday morning and says, I don't want to listen to you, quote unquote, elites, you so-called party bigwigs. I'm in this thing. You want to bring it on? Bring it on in Chicago in August.
So one of the things that can be played for dramatic and political gain is that last thing that you said, Gary Dietrich, which is, I'm going up against big media. I'm going up against the political elites because I have a responsibility to the people. The people have put me here and the people will propel me to victory. So, kind of playing the insider-outsider game strikes me. But beyond that, it seems as though this feeding frenzy, and this doom loop that the op-ed people have, cranked up. I might have read 30 op-eds about how he should drop out and all this, and every parallel analogy, etc. So help me with the realities now. I get it. He's dug in. He feels the aggrieved party right now. What are the realities?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest single reality, Mark. There's a couple of realities. One is, and you can't divorce any of these, okay? The political environment is made up of several different aspects, right? One of them is the media. And you rightly pointed out, Mark, I think the media now, the consensus is almost universal in the media. Biden's going to have to go. It's just a matter of when and how. I mean, wouldn't you say that is by far, to me, 80 to 90% of what you're hearing out of the media world. And then secondly is the political reality. All of his, backers in Congress and beyond, and importantly, all of those Democrats that have to run in November, from Senate candidates to House candidates to state governorships to state legislators. That is another political wave that clearly is building. More members of the House came out over the weekend, said he needed to go. And these are not backbenchers. 4 members of the Democratic House leadership, the ranking members of their committees, including guys like Jerry Nadler, who've been around a long time, are saying, that's it, time to go. But here's the political reality, Mark, that I think you're trying to get at. The lever to me of power that is going to eventually, I think, be pulled is the cutoff of major donors from presidential campaign contributions. They say they're shifting their monies now to House and Senate races. There are people saying, even the daughter of Disney said, I'm not giving any more until I hear that the president is stepping aside or he's made a decision that we all can agree on. And that, to me, Mark, that's the lever of power shutting off the spigot of campaign contributions, or at least turning it down to 50%, that may be the one that finally says, well, everybody else can say what they want, but we got to pay for TV ads.
Right, right. This is a point that we made last week with that Disney, Abigail Disney move was, really high profile, along with others, though, as you suggest, and some pretty high profile kind of in the glitterati of Hollywood pulling back from Biden as well. He has to release his delegates, though, doesn't he? The delegates are
absolutely
his. Yeah. And the only person who has access to that war chest, which is a significant one, is Kamala Harris.
Well, there's an interesting dynamic in that as well. As the details are coming out more about this, people need to understand that there's very arcane and very complex rules about PAC donations, about donations to campaigns, which are very different rules than, as you know, Mark, to PACs. So how the math being done right now internally in the Biden campaign and in Washington is, okay, how much of that pie would, quote unquote, automatically go to Harris and how much wouldn't? How much would have to have donor approval or some other mechanism to make that happen? That's on the money side of it. On the delegate side of it, you have it exactly right. I think anybody in the know now knows this. Biden has to release the delegates for them to be assigned or voluntarily go to somebody else. They really can't be assigned. But even there's now, there's the legal beagles starting to dig deep and saying, okay, well, let's get down into the nitty gritty of what the meaning of the word is when it comes to delegate loyalty, pledges, and responsibility. And there are some who are beginning to say, well, you know what? They don't absolutely 100% have to vote for Joe. There might be some wiggle room for them not to do that. So all those things are playing out, Mark, at the same time.
Wow. I see so few good moves for Joe Biden. I see an amplified sense of almost scrutiny, I would call it. The president was always scrutinized, but now, his every utterance on the campaign trail, which he actually had a pretty good weekend. I mean, he was out there. It seemed like a pretty demanding weekend, and he met those demands. I was saying that Fetterman said it was 90 degrees, and he was out there doing retail politics. But I feel as though the momentum is just so much against the guy right now that despite his Morning Joe protestations and his various media appearances, it's really hard to stem this tide. You're not a big prediction guy necessarily. But can you percentage it for me, like the chances of him actually stepping back?
Yeah. Well, Mark, you know me. I don't like to get into the proverbial who's going to win this November. Can you imagine answering that question 2 weeks ago compared to today?
Yes, thank you. That's a great point.
This is why I don't get into that game. I've been in politics for 3.5 decades and in media equally as long. And here's the reality of it. I've worked on campaigns, as you know, Mark, from legislative to presidential. I've worked in our Senate and Assembly. I've been at the highest levels of media stuff on the network. And here's what I've come to learn. Anybody who will tell you they think they know what's going to happen on November 5th right now. And by the way, I'm going to include in that who thinks for sure they know Donald Trump is going to win, doesn't know what they're talking about in a historical context. In reality, so much can happen even in the next 4 months. But having said that, I'm not going to make any hard and fast predictions, but I can tell you, and I am a very keen observer about what is and what is likely to happen and what is possible to happen, not what somebody thinks they would want to happen or wants to tell a party line. And here's what the reality is. The momentum against President Biden has become, I would say, getting close to overwhelming. When you have members of his own party, members of the party leadership structure, people in his own White House now talking to the media quite openly, as you know, about the last, especially 6 to 9 months of the president's performance. The donor class, it is becoming very, very difficult, to use your words, Mark, to see a path out of the woods for this because it is, in most people's minds, a somewhat intractable trend line that President Biden is fighting against, swimming upstream, and everybody is waiting for the next car wreck, the next shoe to drop, whatever analogy you want to say, that at some moment he's going to have another quote unquote bad night or bad day, and then truly it will be over. That's the challenge for the White House and the president right now.
Corinda says Americans are ungrateful, and one mistake, and he's under the bus. Americans are ungrateful. One mistake, and he's under the bus. No one remembers all the good that he's done for the country. This is one of the problems with that abysmal performance. It does focus the questions around his mental acuity and not around an extremely accomplished guy. When you look at 3.5 years, it was a divided country when he came in. It was in the middle of COVID. You got to give the guy credit. He did a lot of great things with some pretty strong political headwinds. This infrastructure bill that he got through was extraordinary. I mean, it was transformational. He got the Medicare negotiation around drugs and pharmaceuticals. These are things that Trump and the Republicans talk about, but of course they never actually put in. Instead, it's tax cuts, et cetera. But these policies don't matter as long as it all becomes how he's doing in terms of mental acuity.
Well, Mark, you have the actual narrative conundrum down pat, and it is this. Okay, in politics and in modern politics in particular, we want black and white. We want either or. Either Biden did fantastic and he'll do fantastic in the future, or we have to discount everything he did in the past and he's therefore not going to be any good in the future. No, it's not either or, it's both and. I think for many, what you're hearing out of most members of Congress is this narrative. Yes, he is an honorable man. He did fantastic things in our view as Democrats in the past, not just in his 3.5 years in the White House, but over the course of many decades. However, so comma, and what we're seeing, what the trend lines that are coming out, what you've heard from people in the media and in the White House and people close to him who've been in meetings with him, we are concerned about the future. It's not the last 3.5 years. It's next 4.5.
This is something Randy agrees with you on, but we're not talking about what happened in the past regarding Biden's administration. We're concerned more so than ever for the future. That's essentially what Gary just said. I do think, to be fair, and I think you're allowed to reference accomplishments because I think, past accomplishments can be reflective of future likely accomplishments. So I don't think it's completely, it's like, that was the infrastructure plan, whatever. We're not talking about that anymore. All right. So I have a quick question about down ballot because, House and Senate in play. Can you speak to some of these races that aren't presidential races in key states?
Oh, this is so important, Mark. It gets lost, but it really shouldn't get lost, okay? The House and the Senate are both in play. Both parties know this. The Democrats have the deck stacked against them just by the calendar because a third of the Senate is up for election every 2 years because they're 6-year terms, right? In this particular cycle, and this is a challenge for Democrats, and they're well aware of this, they are much more vulnerable. They have many more members in vulnerable states than they would have had in other election cycles for a long time. And that's the problem in the Senate. In the House, we know the razor-thin margin. In California, for example, just take California. There are about 6 seats that are true swing states where vulnerable Republicans are really being challenged. There's one in the state capital region, Kevin Kiley, who is like really under the gun, and they're coming after him, or a first-term Republican. And believe it or not, and the people find this hard to believe, California could be the determining factor. How those 6 seats, right, amongst everything else in the country, could determine who literally controls the House, therefore who literally controls the budget process, could put the brakes on any Trump legislation, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem for down ticket races, and this is where the political calculus has flipped, Mark, in the last month. I was telling people, look, House Republicans are very vulnerable because they're going to have to answer for the Trump convictions. That the first thing that a reporter is going to ask when they go into that district is, so you're behind Trump? Well, Trump's getting a reprieve, as you know, because this Thursday was supposed to be his sentencing in that case. And it's been pushed to September because of the Supreme Court's immunity case last week. So now the calculus, and this is what happens in politics. This is what I was saying earlier about anybody thinks they can tell me what's going to happen in the House, Senate, and the White House come November. Go count your checkers again. Because now Democrats are on the defensive. Every Democratic House member, every Democratic member who's up in the U.S. Senate is going to be asked this one question. Do you think President Biden is your best candidate in November, and will you stand behind him now? That is a very tough position to be put in a swing district.
Now, that's a really interesting point because it puts a fine point on the spot question that is, I think it's kind of an analog to the question that's asked to GOP running various candidates saying, do you accept the results of the last election? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, listen, before we start, GOP, it's, do you accept the results of the last election? Democrats is, do you accept that Joe Biden is your best? That's a really great take, Gary Dietrich. So Democrats are truly vulnerable. Donald Trump, at least by much of the recent polling, right now is the likely winner. And it's very possible he'll have the House and Senate when he wins. It's possible. Again, it's a real battle. All right, last thing I reflect on with Gary Dietrich is California. We often think that our vote doesn't matter. It's a bunch of Democrats here. It's a supermajority, blah, 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 blah. But Gary Dietrich just gave us the reasons why the vote is really important. California could be pivotal in this upcoming election. Pal, I'm so excited to have you part of our show. And again, you can find Gary Dietrich across the CBS television network and on iHeart Radio, as well as a political analyst for both. He's here on Mondays, and great to have you here, man. A lot going on. There's once in a lifetime craps going on now, right?
That's exactly right. I mean this when I just finished meeting with a friend who's been in politics with me for 35 years, and we agree, Mark. We've never seen anything like this. One last thing about the House races, I'll just throw this in. Turnout, turnout, turnout. If you have a weak top of the ticket, either side, that can drive those House outcomes substantially. That's something Democrats are now very aware of.
Gary Dietrich, thanks. Look forward to next time. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.